This is our Anything in Print podcast.
Once you start running your own business, you're then challenged with the day-to-day problems that come up, and your need to expand. You need to know the people around you. You need to know the other business owners. You need to know what they can do, and if they're prepared to work with you when you need assistance. And there's often a need is to get to know a lot more people. Yeah, you're comfortable in the wider community. So I don't really like to stray out of my comfort zone, but if I did, it would always be with people who were probably production people as well. So you were on the same page. Challenging yourself to be part of the community, stretching your personal development was not necessarily my strong point, but you were forced into those situations in the groups that you joined. I'll be going into my 48th year, and the number of significant changes, the number of significant technologies which have actually been bolted onto our industry it seems to be endless, and you do need to actually acknowledge that it's going to happen. The next thing is going to happen. So you're in the position, either get on board or watch others get on board and follow the trends at a later point. Basically, you just have to keep your eyes and your ears open and listen to what you're hearing from the manufacturers and from anybody that you regard as a company that's either slightly more advanced or bigger and better than you are, and then look at what they're doing and how you may be able to implement that. And then if you can't afford what they're doing, find an alternative. Find something that can be at a lower level that you may be able to enter into the arena.
Hi, I'm Tim Carter, one of the senior leaders here at Ricoh in the UK, and I'd like to welcome you to what's going to be the final episode of Series 2 of our Anything in Print podcast. This episode is entitled Stronger Together. Now, what a journey it's been so far over the last 3 years as we've welcomed and spoken to some of the most inspiring people in our business network. If you haven't caught up yet on the previous episodes from 2023, I really encourage you to do so, as the topics may help you find ideas for growth and innovation. In our community here at Ricoh, we feel very strongly about supporting the industry and our partners and clients, and as such, as much as we possibly can. Hence, we dedicate a lot of time to such activities as this podcast, or we sponsor industry awards, events, and conferences. We genuinely believe that we're stronger together as an industry, and we all play our part in the future of print. This leads me nicely to my guest today, Charles Rogers, who I've known now for a number of years, and who's a strong advocate not only for the industry as a chairman of the IPIA, but also as a long-standing business owner, a believer in the craft, the creativity, and the community in print. So Charles, good morning and a really warm welcome to you.
Morning, Tim. Yes.
So let me just kick off. It's great to have you on the show here today. So before we dive deeper into the conversation, let's start with you. Let's understand a little bit about your story and some of the work that you've done along the way.
Where to start? Like many people, coming into the print industry is not necessarily by design. It's by accident. An introduction to my father's friend at the time, who was a sales director in a pre-press, the largest pre-press company in London, saw me enter the industry on the bench as a hand planner. Like most people's careers information at the time, there was nothing about print. The only comment was when the teacher turned it over was, you have to be strong because there's moving a lot of paper around. That was it. That was the entire content for the print industry, which is shocking. And it's probably not much different today. But anyway, this saw me come into London in the reprographics area, go to the London College of Print, and start to immerse myself in the world that was quickly very technical instead of being on the bench. So from 1979, first technical devices came along, and within a few years, Page Makeup Systems, and that was my path to run and become a director of the company and looking after probably one of the largest Hell pre-pressed installations in Europe at the time. We were large, so that gave access to lots of other industry technical equipment that we managed to put in. Some people may remember things called a Quantel paint box or a Darlim retouching stations. Well, we had the Darlim, and we worked with Quantel. I worked with a guy called Robert Long, who was the part of the JPEG committee that actually set the standard. So a real computer expert. And there's me, just a young lad from a different world to him. So, but
it's interesting you make reference to that, and I know that world very intimately, because at that time I was working for Crossfield, one of the alternative suppliers of pre-press systems and scanners. In the heady days of repro, and I know that particularly the community in London in EC1, EC2 was thriving with lots and lots of very, very successful repro companies. And in those days, I don't know whether you were the same, but in those days, when I was selling into repro companies, most company owners drove around in Range Rovers or Bentleys or Rolls Royces. Yes. It shows that things have changed somewhat in print over the years.
Yes, I did my apprenticeship at a company called DS Colour, which was the managing director's name was Sam Rubini. He was quite a short guy, but he drove the biggest Mercedes that he could climb into. And our car park was, quite a nice showroom. And when I became a director, I did manage to bag an XJS as a company car at 24, which was very nice at the time. But those were those days, and now there are, then it changed once we got through to the late 80s. The seeds of change of the next generation of where we were going with pre-press and print were all too evident. But DS Colour was in just off City Road to start with, and then in Islington, in a small back street called Britannia Row, and my life was centred, as you just said, EC1, EC2 from there on, and pretty much for most of it, apart from a short stint over near Tottenham Court Road in the agency land, has predominantly been in that area. So coming out of Farringdon Station for the first time, I was on my way to the London College of Print at Back Hill. And the area was not the area it is today. It was very different, very different.
Absolutely, yeah.
But when I always had the impetus to start my first business. I knew I didn't really want to work for someone else. So as soon as I could, probably around the age of 30, late 20s, I started my own business. And believe it or not, that was with Crossfield Equipment. So we had Studio Link and the 9500 Page Makeup System. I bought Crossfield scanner, output device, and proofing, and we went from a standing start to being open 24 hours a day, 6 days a week within a week's, and skyrocketed because we were tapping into what was the new sector of the industry at the time, and we called the company Desktop Repro, and that was the name of the sector, and we were hugely successful from it. Our competitors, believe it or not, really were copy shops, and they were the ones that were eating at our base, not other repro companies, effectively, because they could output film separations from this new language, PostScript, on linotype devices that in some areas mainstream manufacturers were actually struggling to keep up with, because they were converting PostScript into their native language before they could output film. So we didn't last as long as we thought, and within a few years that stage had come to an end, and I completely converted to desktop equipment, Macs and PCs. So it's rather strange when you think back. Your first Mac, I think we bought it in 1990, 2FX. I can't remember how much it was. Probably the best part of £10,000 with software. And since then, if you counted up all the Macs you've bought or commissioned or owned, I've got loads of them around me.
Yeah.
And you go into an Apple store and you have some very young, sprightly person come to help you. That can be an interesting conversation.
It does amaze me when I cast my mind back, and we're showing our vintage here. But it does amaze me that back in the mid-'80s, when proprietary page makeup systems were the most automated solution for creating pages for magazines and printed collateral, and being able to retouch those pages and assemble those pages. And at Crossfield, the investment levels required to get into that, could be £1 million plus upwards.
Yes.
And today, as you say, you can walk into an Apple store and buy an Apple loaded with desktop applications and Photoshop and be able to do far more for £1,000 than you were able to do on those proprietary systems, in the 80s, which is not that long ago. It just shows you how much technology has advanced over that period.
Indeed. I think back, I open up a laptop, which you just put in a bag and carry with you. You've effectively got maybe the best part of 10 skilled jobs in that laptop straight off. Everything from camera operating, scanning, page makeup. There is no plate making anymore. That's gone. That's just the PDF that now needs to go to CTP. So there are so many jobs, the retouchers and all the ancillary support that went around pre-press in allied but different sectors, for making up artworks, paste up. It's all gone. It's all now nicely tucked into a laptop, which you can put in a bag and take with you anywhere. And you have all those skilled jobs on tap in software. It's quite scary to think how many things have gone and the people that you used to know. But once you start running your own business, you're then challenged with the day-to-day problems that come up, and your need to expand. You need to know the people around you. You need to know the other business owners. You need to know what they can do, and if they're prepared to work with you when you need assistance, and likewise when they need assistance. So being in that EC1, EC2 area quickly meant that if you needed, and there's often a need, is to get to know a lot more people and a lot more companies, and benefit from bits of equipment they might have that you don't, and vice versa. And there were actually quite a few printers in the area at the time. There's not so many anymore, because it's the real estate is not the place to put the footprint of a press. Digital presses, yes, but not conventional presses. So it was quite an interesting period to expand your networking and learn to network and learn to talk to other people and get to know them. Back in the days of DS Color with the Hell equipment, we had a user group for that. So from a young age, you were involved. And with Crossfield, we had a user group, 9500 users group, which I think I might have actually been the chair of, with other people in the area. So that was interesting. And later on, with other significant pieces of equipment, becoming involved in the user groups. It was a great place to meet people and discuss issues with the equipment, issues with software, and talk to the manufacturers direct, which is what I always really, really like to do. Just talking to the fellow company owners and staff in there is good, but actually talking to the manufacturers, felt that you actually generated a real connection back to the developers. Whether you did or not, I can't remember, but it felt like you were part of the community from the manufacturer all the way through to whoever as far as your reach went, which was good.
Well, it's interesting you use that word, because I was just going to ask you the question. You use the word community, and from what you're saying and the sense of what you're saying, it feels to me like there was maybe it's changing and maybe not for the better, but during that time there was a true sense of community. We were sort of in it together. There was camaraderie. There was there was good positive engagement and feedback of ideas. There were active user groups. So you seem to thrive in that environment. Am I correct in making those assumptions?
Oh, I don't know. Where I thrive is I don't know, in the production area of the company with the door shut, really not talking so much outside. That's where I really thrive, to actually get the work done. People fall into camps, maybe you're a certain type of person. Many are given over to sales. It's a natural thing for them. I'm a production person, so I like being in my space with my equipment and my team and producing the work. But as you get confident and learn about what you're doing technically, then you're comfortable in the wider community. So I don't really like to stray out of my comfort zone, but if I did, it would always be with people who were probably production people as well. So you were on the same page. Challenging yourself to be part of the community, stretching your personal development was not necessarily my strong point, but you were forced into those situations in the groups that you joined. So you overcome those fears, and they were fears at times of kind of being caught out. Do I actually know as much as I think I do? But those days were good, interesting, and fun.
Absolutely. And I think it's fascinating to think that, operating equipment and technology that was your sort of comfort area in production was genuinely a real craft back then. And if you look at the sort of the training requirements and the investments in people with the apprenticeships, it's changing very, very significantly today. And I assume that improvements in tech like, CTP and digital presses, they've helped in streamlining automation and production, but it could come as be seen as a threat in terms of, the next generation of AI products and solutions. What are your thoughts around that in terms of the movement away from what was very much a craft-based production environment to something that is moving and transitioning to something that is now more automated, less manual touch points, and in the future with AI, he's going to take it to the next level?
It's an interesting point, and it's one of continuous movement and change. Next week would be the week that I actually started immediately after Easter in 1977. So 47 years after next week, I'll be going into my 48th year. And wow. The number of significant changes, the number of significant technologies which have actually been bolted onto our industry it seems to be endless. And you do need to actually acknowledge that it's going to happen. The next thing is going to happen. So you're in the position, either get on board or watch others get on board and follow the trends at a later point. But, the key ones, especially for print, is the introduction of digital print, which really was in the early 90s, going through development from photocopying, as I used to refer to it, and then in the early 90s, you had to admit it was actually good enough that you bought one. So, and had to start adjusting your mindset that this is actually a digital press. It's not just a color photocopier anymore. And from then, the improvements are just unbelievable. The quality of digital print now is outstanding, and the introduction and range of digital finishes to embellish the page that we print, as it used to be turned ink on paper, but it's now toner on paper, is almost unbelievable from over 40 years. The amount of specialist finishes, the cost with the manpower, but the skills of those people used to be high, but it's largely disappeared. And what we have is more cost-effective alternatives, which really improve the messaging on print, which is why for marketing, branding, communications at a level, the one-to-one personalization with the audience, all these things are now possible to improve and deliver a high-grade printed product that would not have been possible 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's just not possible, not on the cost. So as far as technology is concerned, really, I used to read as much as I could, be aware of what might be coming. Sometimes things took a long time to come. CTP was coming for 3 years, and in the year that it went, I'd never output as much film. I'd never produced as more proofs. But when it came, it came. And as soon as your customers found that they could actually take on pre-press, which is magazine publishers at the time. For me, I was producing around 30 magazines a month. You quickly found that door was going to close for you, so you had to move forward or leave the industry. So I moved forward in other areas, which was print management, digital printing, and taking on the creative role. So expand your skill base, because we'd seen, well, from my point of view, you've seen so much design, because you're responsible for processing it for other people, that you inadvertently have a knack of knowing what works for what audience, what's going on, what the current standards are, what color palettes are working at the moment, what fonts are working at the moment. It's all very trendy, just like clothes. It changes in style. Yeah. So if you can keep on top of that, and maybe bring in 1 or 2 creative people in your workforce, which I did, meant that you could repackage yourself using the same skills and carry on, and at least give yourself another lease of life.
I mean, you've very clearly and eloquently described how you've evolved and changed and embraced change in a positive way, over the last 47 years. Yeah. But what would you say, what advice would you give to our listeners who are operating in the sector, who see the landscape changing very radically? We see continual consolidation of our sector, and there is some fear associated with the future of print, because there's some unknowns. Print's repurposing itself, and as you say, with new technologies, with digital print, the ability to do things differently and use print differently as part of the marketing mix. But what would you say to our listeners that maybe have not are considering and experiencing the changes that you've talked about? How can they embrace it in a positive way as you did? And what's your sort of outlook in terms of what the future holds for our sector?
Basically, you just have to keep your eyes and your ears open and listen to what you're hearing from the manufacturers and from anybody that you regard as a company that's either slightly more advanced or bigger and better than you are, and then look at what they're doing and how you may be able to implement that. And then if you can't afford what they're doing, find an alternative. Find something that can be at a lower level that you may be able to enter into the arena. The examples I could give are all relevant to the things that I did at the time to help me expand, but not necessarily pay through the nose. When Epson first brought out 4800 A3 inkjet device, did a little printer, it was capable of producing essentially contract proofs, but the color couldn't be controlled on them. Now we're looking at color control software and how you might be able to affect that on one or two different mediums and sell them as contract proofs. Now that was hugely expensive to do, but I managed to find a way around it and set up slave servers, slave PCs, so that from one rip we managed to run 3 devices. You weren't supposed to, but and figure out how to create your own color curves so you could set them up for different conditions. And in the first year, we went from printing no digital inkjet proofs to printing 6,000 sheets, I think, for the book publishing industry. So you need to find opportunities where you can maybe save some money and be creative in your own way with your own skills. And when you're challenged, I think many people can like a challenge and they like to find ways of how they can improve what they're doing, basically get blood out of the stone instead of having to pay or buy the best technology there. And then when you can afford it, move upwards. and probably move upwards as soon as you can, because then you'll probably be buying better equipment, more reliable, that actually delivers a more consistent product. So that would be my advice. Network as much as you can. Seek out the experiences of others. Seek out what they're doing if they're honest with you. During the 80s, 90s, especially in EC1, EC2, when you got to be known in the area, most people we were a community. It was a networking and a degree of assistance and support for each other, and that worked well. I ended up in collaboration with a guy that was my time over near Tottenham Court Road, and fortunately I had all the experience, he had all the money, so everything I'd like to buy, I told him, he bought it, and I ended up working for him for a while. And there it was Aladdin's Cave. I had an Agfa Chroma press. I had an Indigo, I had two Indigos. I had a Heidelberg DI. I had a Lambda, wide format Lambda, and a digital photographic studio that I was production director of. So they were all the things that I would love to have had if I could afford them myself at the time. But we had them all in one place, which was great. So networking, if it wasn't for networking, I wouldn't have been talking to him in the first place. We wouldn't have realized that we had so much in common.
Networking leads me on to, and it's like we've almost planned it, Charles, but networking leads me on to the next topic, where we're sort of almost coming full circle. Tell me about your involvement, maybe from the start with IPIA. How did you start? What was the initial interest, or the reason you were wanted to align yourself to that? And then we can talk a little bit more about some of the fairly significant activities you've been involved in of late.
Well, my experiences with the IPA are basically chalk and cheese from the start to where I am now. To start with, like many people, I hadn't heard of the IPA, no involvement, didn't know what it did. Someone that worked for me wanted to join to improve sales and do networking, and it was like, fine, if that's good for you, do it. But eventually I was left with the membership and not really doing anything with it. And at one stage I was very, very close to actually leaving the IPAA, because I did at the time the page turn versions of the magazine, the Innovation magazine. But there was a turning point, and the IPA began to address itself and become a much more expanding and institution, and I felt that there might be an opportunity to meet more people, especially on print and print management. That was my aim. So I decided to get more involved, and that's where I said those wrong things. Okay, if you're going to do these new expansions, I will get involved, and that led me within a couple of years to be asked to be on the council. That's about 8 years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago, and not that I sought out the higher positions in it, but inadvertently somehow I got voted in as the vice chair, and I'm now the chair. But the things that the IPA does now are nothing like it did 10 years ago. It's just in another level. So
one of the areas we've discussed, and it's repeated itself on a few occasions, is the word community. You've used it on a number of occasions. And from my experience of being on council at IPIA, I see that there's a true sense of community with the IPIA organisation. What are your thoughts on that? Has that been something that's been appealing to as part of your development and your increased role and responsibilities within IPIA? That true sense of community and the extended sense of community it offers to the sector.
Interesting. I suppose it is, because you're drawn to, as human beings, we're drawn to seek out conversations with other people, especially like-minded people, which means your industry. So it's been a great place to meet names that you've seen. You've seen the faces, you've read the articles in many magazines, but you've never spoken to them because you wouldn't have been anywhere with them. So as I've spent the majority of my life, as I mentioned earlier, in production, I was one of the people who's just too busy to go out. I'm too busy. There's an event on today, or they're doing this, or we're doing that. Come along. No, can't go. So only when I decided, okay, let's actually make an effort to put the time aside to go to events, meet people, then it kind of completely changed. And especially when you get on the council of the IPA, you start to meet people that you would never have been in their company, much like your own. Why would our paths have crossed? But now that they have, there's conversations. And once you get to be of a certain age, it's not long before you will have a touch point in technology and crossover, and conversations can easily start to flow now, very easily. It's so interesting to then learn of other people's journeys that are different to yours, but we've all been in the same space. And especially once you get on something like the IPA, we're now no longer talking about EC1, EC2. We're talking about the whole country. Every other major print city or centre, I'll have met somebody who operates in that space. They're from the southwest, from the Midlands, from the north, from Scotland. There's from Wales, Ireland. The demographics of your stamping ground have kind of gone. So now it's national, and then when you get to the manufacturers, it becomes international, because many of the executives will be from overseas, and so the networking just moves to a higher level. But even when they are international people that you're meeting, sales and management, yet again, it doesn't take long before you can trace some commonality in equipment development, machines that did or didn't work, but were key and significant decades along the journey. So you very quickly have something in common, even if they come from the other side of the world and English isn't their native language.
Yeah.
So I suppose, yeah.
The theme of today's show is stronger together, which links very nicely to this sense of community. So how do you feel that the IPIA is developing its purpose and its value proposition, being stronger together as an industry?
Well, the IPA has always been strong on networking, bringing people together, and the events that the IPA specifically puts on are designed to bring in some competing companies, but into a close space. So they will work together, they will talk, they will look for ways which they might be able to jointly, increase their sales or increase their output. So networking is a key aspect of the IPAA. If you're a member and you wish to learn about something or gain more experience, come to an event, you will meet somebody, if you put yourself out there, who's going to be able to help you. And the manufacturers at our events are all, to be honest, nothing short of amazing. They can be in competition with one another, but they see that for the greater good, it's better to work alongside and collaboratively. And that's something that you might think wouldn't really happen, but it does. And everybody's got their sectors and has got their clients, and they would obviously be fiercely competitive of them. But when it comes to IPA events, for some reason, everyone's more than happy to, I don't know, let the barriers down a little bit and just network together. So amazing to see and watch and to be involved with.
Yeah, and I've got personal experience of that on myself, so I can fully endorse what you said. That there are the barriers are naturally dropped, and conversations and exchanges and engagements happen naturally that wouldn't normally happen if you're in competition with somebody else, and it doesn't happen in this community, which I think is great, and I think it demonstrates that we are more successful together than we are independently. So recently, you have been very busy. And in fact, I think that the policeman at number 10 now knows you by first name. But you've been very busy lobbying government, and there's been lots of very positive publicity. But I'd like to hear it directly from the horse's mouth in terms of what difference can we as IPIA and you as the chairman of IPIA continue to make with legislation to help our sector be stronger for the future?
Well, there's, for anybody that actually begins to learn how government works, there's two sides to it. There's the political side and there's the civil service side, and they are two sides of the same coin. They're completely opposite, and yet they're entirely wedded together. So in terms of how do you actually get legislation, you need support on both sides. You need political support to actually create the impetus to start something, but you need the civil service support. Otherwise, you're not going to make the distance, because that's the side that actually write the legislation, that write the policies, that actually create the clauses and put forward the wording, which the politicians will then pick back up again and debate and agree to enact, or it drops away because it's not good enough. So talking to government is, from the IPA's perspective, we've always had a strong connection to Department of Business and Trade for the last at least 5-6 years, very good relationship. So we kind of know how the civil service works, and it's important to understand the levels of where people are deputy directors, director generals, which permanent secretary they might report to, and then which ministers that permanent secretary might actually work with. So there's a hierarchy that it's best to learn if you because you may be just talking to the wrong person. That's it. So great ideas, but you're not in the right space. Then on the political side, it's the incumbent government, who might you be able to speak to, who might you be able to get access to, that's actually an MP that will be interested in taking up your calls. So in the last year, by networking, I managed to be given the opportunity to go to number 10 and in the first instance speak to two special advisors of Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister's, one for business, one for politics. And really they're looking for ideas that they can take forward. They're looking for a win in their own space. So what we would take to them is lots of ideas about tax breaks, which has now come out with for everybody actually in the last budget, with the deductions on investing in capital equipment, but that was in our original engagement letter. And then to advise them about the print industry, because most people wouldn't know. The sixth largest print economy in the world, the UK, was the fifth, but we're still up there. There are no other strong manufacturing or service sectors for many industries that are even in the top 10. Well, we still are, and we need to be assisted to stay there. And they wouldn't know that because they're just ordinary people at the end of the day. What would they know about print unless someone comes along and tells them? So apprenticeships, levelling up. Print is not London centric. It's one of the few key industries where actually there's some of the strongest manufacturing facilities are not even in the southeast of the UK, and they're certainly not in London. Maybe the sales and management meetings might be connected to London and people might go to London, but no, there's lots of stuff that happens out. So levelling up we are an easy win for anybody who wants to take that seriously to assist our industry. So we go there with a whole shopping list of things that we would like somebody in power to be at least aware of, and find that they will turn into some kind of legislation that will go through and support our industry. we were pressurising to be given the same status as other heavy industries for energy consumption. So, they're in a different bracket to us. Printers are not in that, and yet large plants require will consume an awful lot of energy and need it at a cost point that enables them to compete. So, we're not included in that basket of heavy energy users, but hopefully we will be, and hopefully we will get to that. So you're looking for things that will be good for the industry to promote, and we're not the only ones that are attempting to speak to government. Lots of people, they speak to their MPs at a local level, they write to their MPs, they talk about their own issues to do with it might be just down to car parking at a local printers. If we had a better car park facility, we'd be able to get our staff to work, or better bus transport, or better train transport. So the local issues could be varied and down to what we would regard as insignificant issues for the print industry, but they still affect how maybe a local industrial base might work. So there'll be activity all over the country at a very local level. We're trying to raise it to a national level and bring to the attention of central government all of our issues, and at the same time discuss them on the civil service side. And if you're lucky, which we have been, you get the two to connect, and then the magic starts to happen, because things start to be put in place that are not necessarily dependent on the government or the government or the party in control. It's now become a policy, or it's become a direction, and whoever comes along next is not necessarily going to stop all the work in progress. So you need to get to the stage where you bring those two sides together, get some action, get something actually moving, and hopefully it will then stay the course, regardless of actually who's in power. And this is where the civil service doesn't change. Those are the people that are the constant. So if you can get something up and running, you can keep it up and running. And we're beginning to get to that stage.
Well, fascinating to get that feedback, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will be fascinated by the progress that you've made to date. But I know from discussions that we've had that this is a journey, and it's a journey that will continue. And the changes that we need to, that the IPAA need to be influential in changing legislation. It's a continual process of lobbying, persuading, cajoling, networking, and all of the things that we've spoken about. And I'm sure that that work will continue. And as you say, there may be a change of government at the end of the year or early next year, but it's great and it's reassuring to hear that the work that's been done so far is not going to be wasted, even if we have a change in political party at the end of this year or next year, that we can continue that momentum. So I think it's been great, the work that you've done. I think as an industry, we will certainly benefit, and hopefully, that work will continue, and we'll continue to get sympathy, and more importantly, positive outcome and actions from the government to help and support this industry, which, as you said, and interestingly, is still a major manufacturing function for the UK economy, and is still one of the largest global print centres around the world, and we want for that to continue. So, Charles, I'm gonna draw today's programme to a close. Firstly, I want to say thanks for your time and feedback. I found it genuinely fascinating, because quite a lot of the stuff that you've done, there's a lot of parallels in terms of things that I've done as well over my career. So, the heady days of repro and then having to evolve and change, and the impact of the industry as a result of moving from, proprietary page makeup systems to desktop systems using the Apple Mac, and then the print side of our industry as part of that production process, then undergoing the same change, moving from analog to digital. And who knows what's going to happen in the future. But it's great to hear and get your experience of how you've benefited from that change. You've also been very clear in terms of it's not just about you as an individual, it's about how you operate as a community, how you network, how you bring other people together to get a more positive outcome than one that you might be able to achieve just in isolation. So again, this strength of community, this strength of doing things, power of being together has been very, very prominent and obvious through the conversations that we've had. And I think, you know, we all strive for a continued success of this sector. It has experienced and will continue to experience really turbulent times, and I'm sure that that will continue in the future. But with the great work that you're doing, lobbying government, and hopefully legislation that will help and support us, and maybe some of the advice that you provided around, you know, being flexible, being adapted to change, and being operating as a community and operating as a team, you know, may resonate with some of the listeners, and hopefully that will be the case, and hopefully that might benefit them moving forward. So thanks again for your time.
Rico.